Oh, wait, we're on now. Hello. Oh, wait, there's a thing I have to say. Hello and welcome to whatever we're doing today, the Freeplay controller talk. There we go. Hello and welcome to Freeplay's 2018 online session. Freeplay is Australia's largest and longest running independent games festival. The festival is currently running all week in Melbourne, Australia. Tickets to the weekend conference are still available and you can find them at freeplay.net.au. If you'd like to join the conversation, our hashtag is hashtag Freeplay18, not Freeplay 2018, Freeplay18. Oh yeah, then the rest of it's just the rest of the email, so that's it. So my name's Louis, Louis Roots. I run a bar in Melbourne, and I'm going to do my intro last, but I'm going to hand it over to each of you in succession to introduce yourself. We're talking about alt controls, physical controllers, hardware, and installations. So, Ramsey, do you want to start us off?
Sure. My name is Ramsey Nasser. I'm a game designer and computer scientist, and I've done a couple of sort of my practice spans like alt controllers and also sort of things that aren't alt controllers. But the alt controller projects that I've built have involved strap-on harnesses and Atari controllers, and more recently selfie sticks and cell phones. And I guess just to put it in a sentence, I'm most interested in building experiences between human beings. And of all the kinds of games that I've built, alt controllers have been the most effective at creating experiences for people that are facilitated by play, as opposed to experiences that are about the play itself. That's me.
Cool. Robin, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah, hi, I'm Robin Baumgarten, and I make physical controllers, mostly with weird sensors. So lately it's all about springs for me. So I made a line wobbler, check out here, and Wobblegarten, which is like a bit bigger, but it's like this. This is like the transport configuration, all the wires. Anyway, so I make these controllers, and I travel a lot these days to show them at weird festivals, like small festivals, and a few museums, bars, and maybe in the future also arcades. And yeah, I'm mostly interested in kind of actually starting with like the interaction, like a small sensor or motor or whatever, and then building up an experience from there and see where it goes. Often it goes nowhere, but it's kind of the part of the fun for me.
Cool. Tatiana?
So yeah, my name's Tatiana. I'm a digital artist and game designer. I'm based in Paris. I'm in Paris right now. I started as a traditional game designer in the industry, and for some years now, I'm still designing games, but I make a living out of paid exhibits. So I don't distribute my games online or in shops, and most of my games are installations or alternative controllers in some ways have tangible parts. And yeah, I think that what I enjoy the most is making people touch each other's body and stuff like this, create some intimate experience, I guess. Well, that's all for me.
So my proper intro is my name's Louis Roots. I used to run SK Games, and now I run Bar SK in Melbourne. I make controllers usually as a way of making games more accessible to people who might not know how to use controllers or want to use controllers in a social setting. I have the more I experiment, the more stuff breaks. So I tend to stick with very tried and true methods, and I find context and that kind of social interaction really interesting. So that's the space I run. It's sort of a small bar, and also we rotate our displays and we change up all our controllers all the time, and try to be a bit of a hub for games in Melbourne. And there's people there watching right now, I hope, unless the bar's empty, in which case, Dave, you can close up and go home. But if there's people at the bar, then hi. We're streaming to the bar at the moment. So you're all projected on a massive wall at the back of the bar. So I guess the Oh, where do you want to start? I guess I want to start with, let's go with Ramsey. Shit, what were you just saying? I wasn't listening. I was transfixed by your hair. It's really good. Yeah, that's right. I guess so. Like, how do you mean? Explain yourself more about the not focusing on the play itself, but like, not focusing on the game, I guess, but focusing on what play can facilitate.
Yeah, so I guess even in like digital games, like traditional games, I was always most interested in multiplayer games as a player and as a designer. So I grew up playing Counter-Strike in Beirut, which is where I'm from. But the internet was never great growing up, so we'd all play at LAN cafes. And the experience of playing this game, which is very traditional, it's the sort of multiplayer shooter in a lot of ways. But when you're playing in a LAN cafe, you're like physically in the same space as all these other people. And if you got knifed, for example, it was such a humiliating experience because everyone in the cafe would get up and crowd around you and make fun of you for like allowing someone to sneak up on you and knife you. So it's actually a visceral bodily experience of playing this game. And when I moved to America I moved to America 10 years ago, I can't play shooters online because it's just so fucking boring. You're just sitting alone in your apartment and you're just like shooting pretend people. So the like being in the same space as other people is something that's always drawn me as a player. And when I started to make games, those are the experiences that I wanted to make. And the way I say this to my students is sort of my mantra is that I don't really believe I'll ever design anything as interesting or as compelling as two human beings interacting with each other. Humans are just the weirdest, most complex creatures that you can just put in front of each other. And if you just allow people to be people, I think the experiences that come out of that are very deep and very, very compelling. So I don't really have an interest in designing sort of deep narrative experiences or really immersive single player experiences. I really want humans to sort of interact with each other in the same space because that has always been the most sort of mind-blowing experiences that I've ever had while playing games they've been sort of shaped like that. And then alt controllers are a way to do that that gets around, like you said, Louis, the sort of affordances of a controller and the assumptions people make about a traditional gamepad or a keyboard and a mouse. The fact that some people are more familiar with that than others. There's an unlevel playing field. And when you have an alt controller, everyone has, by definition, an equivalent amount of experience coming into it because it's probably the first time anyone is seeing it. So you have this very equitable experience that's equally weird for everyone, for people to have, again, in the same space with one another. So I think that I've been drawn to that since for almost 2 decades now, coming from my like experience in LAN cafe play, and that totally informs my alt controller practice.
So Robin, what do you reckon about do you have the same kind of feeling when you see people playing like Line Wobbler or Baumgarten of like just seeing people like interacting in a space as opposed to like seeing a game? If that's a question.
Yeah. I mean, it's so a lot of my controllers aren't built multiplayer first, so it's like often also a single player experience. But then, especially what I noticed with Line Wobbler was that people would see the game being played because it has such a large position in the room. So like the LED strip kind of goes up, and I found this was actually quite important to the experience itself. So especially like last weekend, for example, I was in France at Stunfest, and at night we put the game outside, and like everyone was just crowding around. They were a bit drunk as well. but they would kind of cheer on each other, or like, you know, mostly actually kind of diss the people, same as like Ramsey said, like where, you know, you would lose and everyone go, ah, but then the biggest cheer was in the end when they finally beat the game. So that was kind of a bit of an aha moment for me as well. We're saying, okay, maybe I need to make the experience not only for the player, but also for the crowd. And I think the old control games give you a really good opportunity to do that, because you're not limited to necessarily just a screen as an output. So you can kind of express yourself more freely. And that's what I've found with Wobblegarden as well, the new prototype I'm working on. So I've made a few prototypes there, and some of them were just single player where you walk along. But by far what works best so far has been, like, you know, making things where multiple people interact, like a Twister game where people, you know, need to touch their springs, and it's like a lot about body contact as well. But I must say, actually, for me, that is more a product of the like an end effect, but not the starting point. So for me, mostly it comes more like smaller scale. You know, it's like I look at different interactions, like, oh, how can I use like a weird motor, or how can I use like this magnet to make something interesting out of it, and then I build slowly on top of it, and hopefully I arrive at something interesting that is like a fun game, you know. But often it's more like a curious interaction, or it doesn't work at all. So it's a bit more chaotic for me. But I must say, like the experience I had like was showing Line Wobbler and Wobblegarden is definitely, like, it is a fun experience to see people really enjoying their interactions with each other. And so maybe going forward, that could be like a way to design games more in a guided manner. But I think I will still do this explorative stuff going forward as well.
That's pretty good. Tatiana, you mentioned a lot of physical interaction in public spaces, or in, you know, these game spaces. Do you find that that's like the thing that you find most interesting?
Yeah, so what's interesting for me in making games that are meant to be exhibited is that when I design a game, I see it as designing a social space with new social rules. For example, my most exhibited game is Atsuno. It's a cooperative game for 2 players. Each player got 5 buttons strapped on the body, 1 on each limb and 1 on the belly. And it's kind of like a twister, but an electronic twister. So the buttons light up, and at each round, and players got to press all of them simultaneously. So it's really kind of like a twister, but played while standing and on the body of the other player. And well, when you play the game, you are not just allowed to touch the body of the other player. It's required by the game system to progress in the game. And this is what I mean when I say, when I design a game, I see it as designing a social space. It's all about how you will, for a moment, the rules will be the rules that the game designer has decided to be for this moment. And this is why I so much like to make games that are meant to be exhibited, especially multiplayer, is that you design some rules that will be, you know, it's like in sports. The rules are when you're on the game field, the rules are the rules of the game. And this is what I like. I also think there is kind of a demiurge complex in this. Like, I like to feel like for the moment, the rules are mine and I'm kind of ruling the moment. But that's more complex. I got to fix for me.
Yeah, I mean, so there's this concept in game design called the magic circle, which is the idea of this social space that it's understood by everyone playing the game that when you're playing a game, you're in a space that's like an exception from like normal life in a way. So when you play like Mario Kart, you're like you kind of hate your friends and you like swear at them and you like cheat them and you do all these things. But to your point, Tatiana, I think alt controllers, because it's so physical, they really allow us an opportunity to temporarily redefine just the rules of society itself and the rules of like what is and is not okay with bodily contact and physical presence with one another. I think games are the most effective at it because they have consent built into them, right? Everyone playing a game is consenting to do that. Everyone is sort of aware of the rules. No one is the butt of the joke, if you do it right. And that allows people to open up and really do things that would be actually impossible, basically, and I think in any other situation. So there's a way to look at alt controllers, not to get like too formalist about it, but there's a way to look at alt controllers as a way of really stretching the magic circle like further and farther out around parts of society itself.
I feel like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
In terms of like
Sorry.
it's like it's almost like stretching the magic circle out as a digital into the physical. Like, because sometimes people will play games, like their characters will, obviously, compete against each other and all these things, and like taking that and making it physical is something that I used to do that all the time. Like, that's like growing up playing PlayStation with a friend, and like if you're losing, the first thing you do is like push them physically in the real world, concentrate, and then you get the upper hand. I mean, maybe it's because I was always a larger kid, so it didn't really. But like, that was always. I always like see games as a total physical space. But I think like alt controllers really push that kind of like, hey, this is a physical space. You're touching a thing and you're playing a game in a space. Look around you, see who's around you, see what you're drinking, what you're smelling, what you're hearing. Like, that's always been really, really good for me. Like, I love that stuff. Drives me. Wait, what are you saying, Tatiana?
No, just that I really like to make games with traditional standard controllers too. The thing is, usually they are designed like, an Xbox pad or something like this. They are designed to enhance the digital immersion, which is cool. I mean, and makes sense when you are doing traditional games. But alternative controllers and games with alternative render interfaces too, I mean, installations in general, they have this potential to not project the players into a digital space behind a screen, but instead try to make a moment with other players. And this is a way of triggering playfulness in a way that is not, I mean, of course you can play Mario Kart and still have this kind of feeling like you will tickle your opponents, your friends, but it's not designed in the game. It's something that you will do by yourself because you decided to. While alternative controllers allow you as a designer to design this in your game and to make it inside your game. And that's a kind of playfulness I really like. I'm doing judo and I love wrestling on the floor. That's really fun. And that's the kind of experience I love to aim when I'm designing a game.
Yeah, why not more video games like judo? I think like I made a note to go back to the aha moment kind of thing because someone tweeted about it and I forgot who, but Robin mentioned it as well. Like, I think for me, like, I had this. I was working as a I was working mobile games in Denmark, and I went to the Nordic Game Jam, and it was that like seeing like this huge room full of people watching like a 4-player space game that was really simple. But the best thing was that like the 4 people who came up to play it weren't the developers. They were just they'd said, hey, can someone come and play this thing? And everyone kind of realized that you're on the same playing field. No one knows this game yet, like, because these people had not played it. Obviously, no one had played it. They just made it. So like it was really simple. They were using regular controllers, whatever. Can't blame them. But they like. Everyone was equal. There was enough sort of physics in the game to make it fun. And I was just watching this room captivated by these 4 people piloting these really dumb little spaceships. It was like, I think that was my moment where I sort of looked around and was like, hey, like, sure, there's like these big AAA games that do all this stuff, but like these people have made this really cool little game in like a day, and it's just like stealing the show. and this stuff was what I liked, and it was what I wanted to like. Also, what I wanted to show people, because like I just knew that that game itself was going to go onto the internet somewhere. I mean, you know, like it would have ended up at itch if that was a thing at the time, but like it was just gonna, no one's gonna see it again. You know, like there are so many little game jam games, and I'm like, those are great. No one ever gets to see them. If only someone would make a bar that they could play. But that was a few years before I did that thing. But yeah, it was like that whole social thing, and especially the lowering the threshold, and you know, making sure that you're not sort of giving anyone an advantage by choosing a game that they're better at or a controller that they're better at. I think that was really good for me.
And honestly, in this sort of age of like instant duplication and distributing digital content has never been easier. There's something really special about the fact that there's some shit that you just had to be there for, you know, like my physical games have been run maybe a total, if we were like to add them all up, a couple dozen times in my life, you know, 30-ish, 40-ish times. And most of the sword fight controllers have been destroyed, only 2 survive. And if you weren't there, you didn't see it. And then that's, you know, it's not a good business model, but it's fucking special. And to your point, and what you mentioned, Tatiana, about your practice, like your stuff is at exhibitions, and if you're there, you get to experience them, and if you're not, then you don't. And there's something, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of artificial scarcity in sort of in the world, but this is like an actual like artistic scarcity, and I appreciate that. There's something really special about that.
Yeah, I think it Sorry.
There you go.
Okay, I think it participates a lot in how you play the game and how you feel the moment. One of the questions in Twitter, question was about what did you, I didn't have the exact question, but it was about kind of like how did you find yourself making alternative controllers and stuff like this. And when I started studying game design, I was really into art installations. And just for one example, I really love the work of Yayoi Kusama. It's a Japanese artist. She makes a lot of stuff with dots. She puts dots everywhere, and she has a series of installation called Infinity Mirrored Room. So it's basically a cubic room with a lot of mirrors, not lots, mirrors on every wall and on the ceiling and on the floor, and the only lights are dots of LED. So it gives you the feeling that the space is infinite, and you feel kind of dizzy somehow when you walk inside of it. It has a funfair feeling, and when I'm experiencing an art installation like this one, or an installation in a fun fair, especially with friends, the moment is unique because I know I won't be able to experience it otherwise or at any other moment. So yeah, this unique character aspect of the experience is quite fundamental, actually, I think, in this kind of practice of game design.
Yeah. I have a friend and a frequent collaborator, Kaho Abe, who also is sort of prolific in alt controllers and physical game design. And she's told me that she very often during like shows gets asked like, "Oh, this is a really cool game. How are you gonna like mass produce it, or how are you gonna like productify it?" She's just like, "That's not what's happening here, buddy. This is not." It's not the goal of anyone involved in this. It's the opposite, actually.
Yeah, we've had really interesting not reviews, but a really interesting reception to the delete game jams we've had at SK, where developers will go in the morning and make games during the day from like sort of 11 till 7, and then we put the games up for a few hours and we're up from 7 till midnight, and then at midnight we delete everything. And like a lot of times people, like we've had really good mixed games, like from like total digital games to like complete physical like sculptures and everywhere in between, and it's always more fun to smash the sculptures than it is to delete. That's why you do it. But it's really, yeah, like it's really good. I like it a lot. I'm surprised so many people like it, but I also just love people grappling with the idea of like, you know, this sort of why would you do this kind of thing, which is great whenever Kotaku posts about it. But there was a really good. Well, the highlight last time was this game called E-Cheese Zone, which James and Joe Cox, who are my American sons, they made, and I miss them dearly. So they remade it for a maze, and also that party at GDC.
Cool.
And it was different. Well, I mean, some of it was different, definitely. Some of it we'll never know because we didn't unlock some of it in the original version. So they made parts of that game that were never seen and then were deleted. So no one knows, you know, except them. But it was interesting because like this sort of stuff, like the things that come up for a night or are played at one point and then they're deleted or destroyed or they're just never needed again. Like they're not things that go away. Like you learn a lot from them. It's like, it's just how you experiment and everything. Like people see a video game go away and they realize that they can't personally play that game again. And they go, oh, that's gone forever. That sucks. And so like, it wasn't there for you forever. Like it was there for what it was for. And we figured out, you know, we learned what people, you know, we saw people play it and we figured out how to make it one better or different. Or we figured out what happened. Like the point of it is not to be a digital video game that sticks around forever and can be copied a million times. The point of it is to be there that night. And like, it's weird when people sort of get really attached to certain controllers and then they're like, where's that controller? And I'm like, I destroyed it yesterday because I needed the buttons. Like it's really interesting to sort of try to switch people away from, it's not a video game. It's not like, you know, it's a whole thing.
Well, it's not a product, right? Like you're not its goal is not to sort of serve you and be around and be consumed sort of as much as possible. It has these other goals. And yeah, there's something very, like you said, like you could delete code and you could delete software, and that's great. I love delete game jam. But there's something very like smashing a physical object is like, that's not coming back, right? Like maybe you can like undo your delete or maybe there's a backup, but if you smash a sculpture, like that, I guess you did that. Yeah, like it's like it's like almost like alt controllers can sort of present you with these like alt goals for like what a game could be, right? And it's what we're talking about is what makes me happy about all this stuff is very like anti-capitalist and very anti-consumerist. And much more about, you know, the space that things are played in, the moment that things are played in, the people who happen to be there, and they live on, like you said, Louis, as like lessons that people learned, but also as like lore and legend. Like there's a game called Tekken Torture Tournament. This is from like 10 years ago, and it's a mod of Tekken. This is like from 15 years ago. It's a mod of Tekken where when you every time your character gets punched, you get electrocuted. There are like electrodes attached to your bicep. And I've never seen that game. I'll never see that game. It'll never run again. I think it may have only happened once. But it like lives on as lore and legend and like documentation. And it's like, oh man, I should have been there. And that's magic. That's like real actual magic in this like otherwise kind of infinitely, you know, repeatable digital life that we all live. So I appreciate that a lot. I think it's really important.
I also feel like it can be duplicated to an extent in terms of like in Melbourne we all love, like we've got a version of Line Wobbler, and it's like, you know, we know that there are other versions of Line Wobbler, but it's ours. It's, you know, it's Chad's, it's Melbourne's one. Like, you know, it's at the parties and stuff. Like, it's a weird kind of. It's not necessarily like either it's commercial, mass-produced shit, or it's, you know, alt control, one-off, amazing, godlike the creations that only we can make. But it's like there's definitely a gray area, which has been really with stuff like Line Wobbler.
Yeah, there's definitely like all controllers, I think, like, in this weird space somewhere between like performative art or art pieces, and then video games on the other side, and then also toys, right? So I mean, toys and electrical toys have or electronic toys have been around for a while. So it's not, it's like this. We're just coming from the video game side right now, so it's like all seems new to us. But I guess that there has been a lot of experimentation going on for quite a while, and it's kind of interesting where you place yourself on that. And so yeah, line wobbler definitely is not quite as close to this one-off art piece side as other things are. So like I'm making a couple copies and iterating on the design, and maybe in the future there will be a commercial release, but I haven't figured out what exactly to do. It's like it's mostly also a learning process about how to make the hardware sturdy enough. Do you really want to travel to China to these massive factories? That's not really what I'm into, right? But that doesn't mean it's bad, right? So that just means like maybe I need someone with a business mindset as well. So like the guys that did Beasts of Balance, so they did they had a prototype. Yeah. The game is as old as Line Wobblers. It's the same duration of the project. But they obviously came to it with a more, we're gonna do a business thing here, or like we built this product, and can we make it into a larger thing? And so they did a Kickstarter, which was successful. The whole shebang was like, oh yeah, we're gonna go to China several times, talk to all these factories, have legal contracts, talk to retailers and all this. And to me myself, that is like super boring, but obviously it's like super important, especially if you want to make a living out of it, or grow a little team around you. Then you need to think about these business aspects as well. And then having these alternative controllers is like an interesting proposition there. Like, what Ramsey, what you said about like durability comes back into it. If you want to have a repeatable experience, you need to make these things durable. And especially me, like, I mean, all the hardware stuff is like hobbyist experience that I slowly learned through the internet and hack spaces. So I'm from the software side, and once you program it once, it'll run the same way. I mean, at least until like Windows updates or something. But with hardware projects, it's like there's a whole new Pandora's box of errors and things that can break, can go wrong, that you can't predict. You just need to have it on show for if you're lucky, it's more than an hour, but usually in the minute, it's like in the beginning, it's like 10 minutes, and then a kid will pull out the cable in the wrong way, and it's suddenly entirely broken. So it's definitely a cool process, and like you learn so much in the process.
Yes.
I saw Beast. I remember playtesting Beast of Balance years ago at like a really crummy like 3D printed prototype. And a few weeks ago, I was at an Apple store in Brooklyn, and like it was just like on the shelf as like one of the things you can get for your iPad. They had a demo actually of it unpacked running on an iPad. That blew my mind to pieces. Like, oh my God, I knew you when you were this big, and now you're like all grown up and a product. Yeah, so I'm super, super happy for that whole team.
Do you want to mention anything about? We were talking before the live stream went up about like, like the open sourceness of the hardware itself, of like what we use, and like the inaccessibility of going to China and getting stuff made, like even circuit boards and like more interesting electronic stuff, like that's not something that you can necessarily do yourself or put it out there for other people to do. Like I'll admit that, like, you sent me over how to make the controllers for Joust, and I got like halfway through it, and then I was just like, I'm bored, and I went and did something else. But,
you mean for Sword Fight?
For what?
For the controllers for Sword Fight?
Oh, Sword Fight, yeah. Same shit.
Yeah.
No. But we've got some over here somewhere. I don't know where.
Yeah, I mean it's actually I got an email just a few weeks ago from there's another sort of punk game space in Pittsburgh, I think, called Like, and they're going to try and build some Sword Fight controllers. Yeah, it's so before we started streaming, we were talking about sort of open sourcing alt controllers and making them reproducible by other people. And when we built Swordfight, which was in 2012, was when the first Swordfight was built. We really wanted it to be open source, and we wanted people to build their own. I built it with a game designer named Kurt Beeg, who's a good friend and collaborator. And so we put the designs online, and the circuit is, like you said, Louis, it's surprisingly complicated to actually build in the way that electrical circuits can be. But we designed it so that all the components were available from Radio Shack, with the thinking that like that way anybody could just sort of go down the street to their local Radio Shack and just pick up all the components. And Radio Shack has since gone out of business. So it's a lot harder to just find the actual ICs that you need to make Swordfight work because of a corporate bankruptcy. And so that's a case where we did everything we could to make this as reproducible by others as possible and empower other people to do it. And yeah, it's not software. You can't just copy and paste. I mean, even software, you need a physical computer, but you can't just copy and paste code. You need to find the components. And all of the documentation that we had on like how to find this stuff from Radio Shack is now completely useless. So yeah, I don't know how you do DIY like open source alt controllers just over time, accounting for companies going out of business and manufacturing practices changing. I went lost there.
Yeah, I got nothing. I've had most success with like things that are more obvious, like arcade buttons and joysticks, like the chunky sort of 8-way joysticks and stuff. I've had that, like, because I find a difficult thing for me when I talk to people about alt control is that like a lot of people talk about, well, they'll say something like, why don't you have any of your stuff at like Control Alt GDC? And I'm like, oh, that's just not really the space for what I do. Like, that's a really good space and I love going there. But you know, you walk in and at least 2 things are broken, and everything else has at least 2 people next to it explaining how to run it, or how you're meant to play it, how you're meant to interact with this thing. Because they're not obvious at all. Right. And like that can be really like, that's an experience, but the experience that I like is letting people figure something out for themselves. And the problem with that is that you can't give them anything complex because they don't figure it out. So it, like for me, like, you know, having an illuminated button means that someone will walk across the bar just to press it because they saw that it was lit up and they don't know what it does. They don't really care. They just want to press the button because they've had 3 beers and they're just a lightweight. But it's it meant that, yeah, like my controllers are, I guess, simple for the situation. But I'm curious if people like have that kind of, find themselves grappling with the trade-off of this is maybe a more fun interaction or this is a more interesting component, but it'll require more explanation and it won't be as intuitive. Like that's an interesting question that I want to know from y'all. So pick someone. I don't care.
I've been talking a lot. If someone else wants to chime in, I'm happy to make space, but I have thoughts.
Tatiana, how do you get people to play your games? Like, is that other people around, like helping them out, or do you just try to like stay out of it?
It depends a lot on what was the experience I got in mind at the beginning of the game design. For example, one of my installation is based on so I like to make games that are hard to understand, but then they are designed like Rosetta Stone to explore. You know what I mean? Like, kind of understanding the rule behind inside the systems or is part of the game. So sometimes it's just for shit and giggles. Like I made an installation called Contre Ciel. It's an artificial sky in a frame hanging from the ceiling, and players got a keyboard, a piano, and depending on what you're playing, the weather will change. You also will change from which planet you look at the sky, so you can see several suns in the sky and stuff like this. So understanding how you navigate in the space and how you change the weather is part of the game. So it can be, rules hidden by design, really purposefully. Also, another example that I think may be funny is I made an installation called Intact, and still it's like a Rosetta Stone to explore. But instead of just letting people experimenting and figuring out how it's working, I have two dancers, two performers inside the installation. So they are not allowed to speak, but they got to help players to understand how the stuff is working by dancing. And it's funny because it gives a really ritual feeling to the experience, because they got to remove their shoes also at the beginning to walk in the installation. So basically the installation is an immersive room with LEDs, and there is cotton wool in front of the LEDs, so it feels like it's some clouds. And well, I think it can be interesting to have some mediators, people that are here to explain the game, if it's by design, if it's interesting for the game. Of course, usually the first of my installations are hard to understand, and I will iterate on the ergonomy and how much you can get the game without any explanation. It depends a lot on what I got in mind when I made the game. To give the other extreme example, I made a game called Snailed It. It's a game for 3 players, but they all play on a regular keyboard, but it's the same keyboard. And they got also the same avatar. So it's all about, elbowing your way to the letter key you want to press, stuff like this. And so this game needed to be super easy to get, because the point is not to have some ritual experience in a museum or whatever. It's about you download it, you're drunk at the party, and you just want to have fun with your friends. So you download the game. Actually, it's online for free, and you just launch it. And well, drunk people are not really good at getting game usually. So it depends a lot on the experience I got in mind at the beginning.
Yeah, I found also that it really depends where you show the game and what audience is there. So a lot of the time especially when we do video games, the audience are gamers, right? So people who are accustomed to explore the mechanics and the inputs of the game. They know, if it's the first person game, then the left stick will be move and the right stick will be look. So it's kind of all these fixed knowledge we've built up over time that is kind of implicit, while especially when you have an old controller, this knowledge isn't quite there. So a lot of people are happy to explore. So they touch the things, they smack them if they look like they should be smacked, or maybe even if they don't. But I found also when I show it in the spaces that aren't necessarily designed for gamers in mind, then people are often much less willing to explore. So some people, if there's no instructions, they don't even start to touch it, even if it's like a button or really obvious joystick or something. They just say, "Oh, I don't know what to do. I don't want to do anything wrong." So they freeze. So part of it is maybe also because it's in an exhibition space, so people are watching. But also, I think that the personal curiosity and experience in terms of games might be super different. So I've resorted to even sometimes putting explanations to the games, even if I feel like it might make the experience stronger if there weren't explanations. So with Line Wobbler, people can get what it's about if they try a bit, but a lot of people just don't try, or they sometimes get too careful, so they never get to the wobbling, because it requires strong acceleration. And say, I don't want to break anything. So you need to kind of sometimes force the player into the experience a bit. If it's only by text, but it not everything is unfortunately is self-explanatory in if you have a very wide audience.
I will say though that I've seen Line Wobbler in public spaces where Line Wobbler is very parsable. It's very it's easy once someone is playing it, it is easy to connect the actions of the player to the sort of output of the game, even if you have never seen the game before. So I've like actually seen at parties and at events, total stranger, like non-gamers, watching someone play Line Wobbler and using the sort of like lizard part of the human brain to be like, oh, when they press forward, the green thing moves forward. Like I can connect those two things as a human because I evolved to do that to survive on the savannah, right? Like when you do that, that happens. And sort of people piecing together like bit by bit is like, oh, when the green thing touches the red thing, the thing starts over. Okay, I guess that's bad. And like I've watched people sort of like put the clues together. You are right though that I've been in situations where whenever I'm at a party and Line Wobbler is there, I get really giddy because I love the game so much. But there are situations where people are like afraid to touch it, and it's like getting over that hump is one challenge, and then once you have a sort of like play has started, there's a question of like whether and like how parsable the game is. So like the far opposite of Line Wobbler, for example, is like World of Warcraft. I think if like World of Warcraft was like being played in a public space, it's very difficult to connect the actions that a player is taking to like what the fuck is happening on the screen. Like I couldn't tell you. Like I've watched people play World of Warcraft, I have no idea what's happening. So even if someone was playing it in a public space, you'd still need to like hand out like manuals to that game so that like someone else could start playing. But there's a middle ground where like if a game is not like overwhelmingly obvious just by looking at it as an artifact, watching someone play it is like demonstrative of how it's meant to be played. And I actually think Line Wobbler is a very good example of a game that does that.
Yeah, it was definitely a design focus with Line Wobbler that it's always a one-to-one relationship between what you do and what happens. Like, you wobble and the attack happens immediately and it never stops. So people said, is the attack timed? Is there like a cooldown? But I definitely wanted to have like, whenever you do one thing, the same thing happens. And also like going forward, I've been talking to a few people about an arcade machine version, like proper coin-op. And that would kind of be interesting because that would change that a bit, I think. Or maybe not necessarily if there's people playing already, but there's a much higher chance of nobody playing a machine that costs money, right? So then maybe I need to work on the onboarding or like getting the people into the game much more, even though if it's a very like freely telegraphing game. But then because it's so weird and minimalist, maybe then we will need to be more of a need of telling the players.
Yeah, a lot of arcade games have an attract mode, and I'm trying to think of like what Line Wobbler's attract mode is. I mean, you don't have that. You don't have a whole lot of pixels to work with.
Yeah, I do have like if you don't play it, it does play itself basically.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So I have a little like an AI playing. I mean, it's a very dumb AI, but it does play through the game. But then
no, I've seen that. Yeah.
But I don't know if you would necessarily connect that stuff with this is your character, right? Because it's just like a green light and yeah. I wonder, yeah.
But the simplicity of that and like a lot of other not even just the simplicity, just the ability to connect the actions of a like as a spectator, the ability to connect the actions of a player to the sort of meaning of the game. A lot of sports compared to like video games are dead simple. Like I remember, like as a child watching soccer, right, or football, no one ever sat down and explained the rules to me, but like when someone put the ball in the net, everyone cheered. It's like you can start to like solve the mystery. So I think there are ways to design in parsability and telegraphing, like you said, into the game that makes it a better spectator experience and makes it also kind of self-describing and self-documenting. If that's a goal that's interesting to the designer, I think all controllers can do that very effectively.
We found really interesting results with games that do a very similar thing where they're very one-to-one. You can see without even necessarily being able to see what the person's pressing, being able to sort of understand by looking at the screen and going, oh yeah, that's the thing that's moving around. That must be that person. Like, though, like sometimes that works with games that are, I guess, linear is. I don't want to describe Line Wobbler as linear, but it's but like games that are more free form, I guess, games that like allow a lot of creativity in the players, they go really well, especially if they're single player things. If they're free and people can really like express themselves, other people love watching people express themselves through games, like painting games and those kind of like driving or like walking sims kind of thing, exploring an area. Like you're in an area and there's all these different things that you might want to go look at, and it's up to the player where they go. Like there's and people watch someone explore an area because they want to see like where does this person go? What attracts this person? Do they want to go over the light? Do they want to go to the dark? Like when it's a game that is like has an obvious goal and is a sort of single player you versus the game kind of thing, it's just not as interesting. It's like you're watching and they're either failing or succeeding, and if they're succeeding, that's okay. But if they're failing, you get frustrated because they're not very good at it. It's just like when there's no kind of failure or success, that's when that was, I guess, the most startling thing for us. Like at a bar as well, you expect it's a bar, it's drinking culture. People want to win but they don't. They want to paint stuff and draw things and be creative, and I guess maybe that's just the crowd we get, but it's been really interesting. All right, what do we get? We're up to now. When do we close? Are we doing this for an hour or an hour and a half? Says the person.
Forget. Yeah. What does Chad think? Oh, 1 hour.
Oh, cool. All right. 10 minutes to go. So is there anything?
There is a Twitter question about the dangers about experimenting with alt controllers. So I definitely, this is years later, so it's maybe okay to say this, but I definitely fucked up the circuit math on an early sword fight controller. And so sword fight is this is one of the last two sword fight controllers still sort of on my desk. So this is worn as a strap-on. I mean, it is a strap-on harness, and it's worn sort of on your crotch. And someone was playing it. We were doing a play test, and they told me that they smelled burning plastic. And I told them that it's New York. Who knows? You're probably fine. It's not. This is why I got an MFA. I'm not an engineer. Nothing happened, but I took afterwards. Then their controller stopped working a few minutes later, and then later that evening when I took apart the controller, it had melted itself on the inside. Not in a catastrophic way, but the timer chip had just kind of dissolved slightly because I fucked up the math. So, and that was strapped to a human being's body, and that's on me. And it's it's only 9 volts of power, so it's not catastrophic amounts of electricity. But there is a when you're dealing with people's bodies, and to my earlier point about consent, people are trusting you as a game designer that you're sort of not going to harm them. There is a level of due diligence that you have to do that is much higher than making a video game. And the worst thing you could do if you made a video game with traditional controllers is maybe it crashes. It's fine, that sucks, but whatever. But if you're making an alt controller, you could legitimately hurt people, and you could. It's just the bar is a lot higher on how careful you need to be with what you expose people to, and especially if you're making things like Edo Stern's Tekken Torture Tournament that I mentioned a minute ago. That is the whole point of the game is physically harming people, walking that line and figuring out how much harm is okay. These are questions that you only have to ask in this kind of space, but they don't come up in other kind of I mean, maybe LARPing, but there are other kinds of game designs where these questions come up. But yeah, that's in terms of biggest dangers to be careful of is actually hurting people with the controllers that you build, because they're you may have forgotten to carry a number while doing the circuit match.
Has anyone else hurt someone with their own controllers?
They weren't hurt. They just.
Has anyone else potentially threatened someone's genitals with a controller?
That's the potentially is the legal distinction.
So I made a game once at a game jam with 3 friends called Knife to Meet You, and it's a game it was a French kitchen knife on a motor that moves, and you have to put your finger between, basically pressing buttons. It was a very cool experiment, but it was definitely not built with like any exhibition in mind. So we just said, okay, we'll just do this for fun. But in kind of the motor we used was very weak, so it's like the cheapest little servo we could find. And then the kitchen knife was also not a sharp kitchen knife. It did look very sharp, so I guess that was kind of part of the fun. So like, you know, as a spectator experience, you know, like this is kind of expected pain. It was quite fun, but we never actually, I mean, did thorough tests on like, you know, can it actually never cut through skin, you know. It never did, and we did actually show it at EGX, Eurogamer Expo in London, but it kind of flew under the radar, I think, and nobody asked us to fill in any health and safety forms. But I have it in my room now, but I'm not super keen to show it again, because, like, no, so far it has been good, and, you know, no one's been hurt, but who knows? But so, like, this kind of, you know, like the scale of games you can make is definitely much wider, and I usually try to be also a bit more on the dangerous side, you know, like hurting people a bit is fine, but obviously, you know, once you get into public space, it's like a whole another legal issue, especially if you're in the States. I guess it's a whole another kind of worms. But even here, I mean, like, you don't want to really hurt people.
Tatiana, have you hurt anyone yet?
No, I hurt it myself. Especially on my first exhibition ever in my life, I did all the possible mistakes. So I got a nail through my hand. I got a pistol, a nail gun to put some nails in some. And at some point, I was quite in a hurry, so I missed. Well, I missed the wooden plank, and, you know, Jesus Christ in myself. I don't know how to say this, crucified myself. So this was my
stigmata is the word, yeah.
This was my first exhibition ever, and a few hours later, I got a driller, and I didn't got a table to drill, so I drilled between my legs, between my thighs, and at some point the driller got, like, I don't know, half a centimeter inside my thighs. My side. So, well, I think that's the worst that happened. But no players. I'm trying to be quite actually careful with them, because I'm not with myself. So, I mean, I could kill someone. So no. Chat got a question. Put a question in the chat bar, by the way, Louis.
Oh yeah. It seems that getting people to try alt control things is a tricky problem. Are there any other disciplines to learn from to help with this? Advertisers, educators, others. Any thoughts?
Yeah, for me, it's the opposite, because I also teach, and I use tricks that I learned from game design and alt controllers to get, like, my students to do shit. Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know that the tricks that advertisers use to make people do things are what I personally want to be learning from.
I think advertising is really interesting for me, because I don't know what to advertise the bar space as. Is it a gallery? Is it a arcade? Is it a bar? Is it, you know, like, it's yeah, it's really odd to know where to put advertising for different events. But yeah, I think I've never been good at it, and I've just been doing stuff, and then eventually people find out about it, and I just go, cool, and don't worry about it. And we've done all right so far. Cool. So is there anything else? I think we've got a minute left. Before I forget, I want to tell everyone who's in Melbourne to go to the bar and drink a lot and pay money to it. But no, actually, because we're streaming another session later tonight, and we'll be streaming the sessions tomorrow. I'll be there from 3 to stream those sessions, not the 1 o'clock one because I'm not that nut. And also, I wanted to tell Gleason to shut up because he tweeted at me telling me to shut up. So, Gleason, suck a dick, fuck off, get out of my bar, banned. Yeah, so if anyone else would like to sort of say anything about where they can be found online, that would be good, I think, before we go. Ramsey?
Yeah, I'm RA on Twitter. There's a weird story behind that. And I'm nas.sr is my website where I have, that's where I post all my shenanigans. So come find me on the internet.
And Robin?
Yeah, I'm Robin_B on Twitter, and my website is wobblylabs.com.
Cool. Tatiana?
Well, my website is Mechbird, MECHBIRD. It's also my name on Twitter, Facebook, kind of everywhere. And I'm writing an article on Gamma Sutra, actually, right now about alternative controllers. So I don't know if you're interested in this. Just have a look or not. As you wish.
And I will also say go to Freeplay and buy tickets. Freeplay.net.au and get stuff. I'm doing an alt control workshop on Thursday morning. I'm gonna hack some mice apart. Not the animal, the controller thing. So come do that with me, and I'll bring you a beer. 3 p.m. the end. Yeah. So thanks everyone, and thanks Freeplay. And I don't know how to stop this, so I'm gonna say it to Chad. Feel free to just cut whenever.
Okay. Bye. Take care.
Thanks for having
Be
us.
playful.
Don't crucify yourself.
I'll do it.